So, of course, if you believe in viruses, once COVID comes along, you do the natural thing, which is to shoot yourself up with poisons to protect yourself against another deadly virus. And then after the third shot, 3 days, 2 days later, dead in his bed because of a stroke or a blood clot or something. And you could say that's because of the poison in the vaccine, right? But I would say it's because he believed in viruses. And if you believe in viruses, he did the normal thing, which is to inject yourself with antiviral stuff, and that killed him.
To August of last year, nobody really knew who I was.
There's about 12 people who are producing 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation.
We need to come together as Americans and realize that we have a war at hand here. Right?
Like, dude, how scared of this shit do you have to be to be wearing gloves, a face shield, and a mask at this point?
Help us to urge folks and say to them, look, it's time to roll up your sleeve and get the shot.
Chiropractor in Omaha, Nebraska, responsible for 65% of the anti-vaccine misinformation. Put what I say to the test. Just don't write me off as crazy misinformation.
Doctor, please bring yourself in order.
600,000 people will die of cancer. 300,000 people will die of obesity this year. When is enough enough?
Okay, we are sitting down. I am sitting down with one of my favorite people. He's been a hero of mine for a long time, Dr. Tom Cowan. Tom, how are you?
I'm good, Ben. Good to meet you.
Yeah, it's good to officially see you here. You know, I've been following you for a long time, and I just have so much I want to ask you and talk to you about. One of my first exposures to you was actually one of your books, just vaccines and autoimmunity. And that's something that I've been I had a keen interest in, and really we'll dive into that too, but just your thoughts too, just with the world we live in virology. This is something I want to dive into and really pick your brain. And, people that are listening, there's going to be all walks of life, and there's a stigma just around virology. And people need to know just the reality we live in this world. We're told that we're sick because of this boogie virus that lives out there, and we're sick because of just bad luck, and we got exposed to this virus that outside the body. And I believe, and I'm in congruence with you, that viruses, what we've been told of viruses, is not really true. And why do we have this stigma in the so-called scientific community that they can computer generate these images of viruses and and say, oh, look, there's the virus? Can you just walk us through, and just with this opening question, do viruses exist in what we've been told, or we've been fed a bag of goods?
So the proper way to say it is, there is no scientific, logical, or rational evidence for the existence of any virus ever. And it's very easy to demonstrate that. And I'm happy to do that if you want. And it's very clear. And all you have to do is just use logic and a little bit of thinking. And you asked a little bit the question, why don't doctors, health freedom activists, et cetera, know this? And it's a very simple reason: because they're scientifically illiterate.
Right.
As was I, by the way. I don't exempt myself from that disease, so-called, if you want to call it that. And in fact, that vaccine and autoimmunity book, I must say, I'm not very proud of these days, because there was a lot of scientifically illiterate pseudoscience in that book. Although I think it did help people not get vaccines, so that's a good thing.
Right.
But we're all learning, and, it's just the way it is.
So, Doc, tell me, you practiced medicine for how long? For decades?
38 years.
So when did you realize the system was flawed? Actually, it wasn't.
Before I wouldn't go to medical school until I realized there was another way to do it. So before I went to medical school, I had already realized that the system and the way of thinking and what we call biology is fundamentally flawed. Now, of course, I didn't know what I know now. And in fact, I didn't know what scientific literacy is. Let me just describe that, because it's really the key to this. The basis of scientific literacy is when somebody makes a claim. For instance, there is a virus and it causes chickenpox. Uh, the next step, and the onus is on that person to prove the claim. It is not on the onus on the other person to give an alternative explanation for chickenpox. Now, let me try to convince you that that's the basis of logic and rational thinking. Let's say you were an 18-year-old Asian fellow and your parents are Caucasian, right? You always wondered about that. And one day you look in your parents' closet and you find adoption papers. And you realize you've never seen a picture of your mother pregnant. And you go to them and you say, "What's the deal? You never told me I was adopted." "Well, we didn't want to tell you because we didn't want to disturb you. We got you from an orphanage in China." You with me?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, it's very clear that's the facts. You were adopted. You are not the biological son of these two people. So you go to your best friend and you say, "I'm a little shook up. I just found out I was adopted." And your friend says, "So who are your real parents?" And he says, "I don't know. They got me from an orphanage in China. I don't know if I'll ever find them." And he says to you, "Until you tell me who your real parents are, I don't believe you were adopted." That's ridiculous.
Right.
Now, the amount of doctors, scientists, virologists who say there's a virus which has a very strict definition, and it's the causative agent of an illness which they say has a definition but doesn't, called chickenpox. So that's the claim. And I say there's no evidence that that's true. And they always say, "So what causes chickenpox? So who are your real parents?" That is a scientifically illiterate person. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, whether I know or not who that guy's real parents are, whether I know or not what this disease called chickenpox or what causes it, or COVID or smallpox or rabies or polio, I can walk you through the steps of how they claim that a virus was found and show that it's scientific nonsense.
And Doc, this is why we're sitting down having this conversation. It's just, the magnitude of what you're talking about would literally change the trajectory of our healthcare system for the better.
No kidding.
And
by the way, bacteria have never been shown to cause disease ever. And this is very simple, Ben. If you say bacteria cause disease, right? That is the claim. Then if you say hammers knock in nails, right? How do you prove that? You go to the ecosystem where you expect to find a hammer, right? Like a toolbox. You pull out the hammer and you hit the nail with it and you see if the nail goes in, right?
Yep.
And then you may go like this with your hand just to make sure it isn't just the movement of your arm, right? And then you may even think hammer go in, and it doesn't, except if you hit it with the hammer, right? And if I said to you, Ben, okay, I'm going to prove that a hammer knocks in nails. I go to the toolbox. I don't know whether there's a hammer in there or not. Never seen a hammer. I hit the nail with the toolbox and I say, "Ben, that proves hammers knock in nails." You would think, "Tom, you're an idiot." That's ridiculous, because you didn't even prove there was a nail in there.
Right.
I mean, a hammer in there, let alone have the hammer as the so-called independent variable, the thing you're testing. Let's tell the people how they said that polio, right? That's a disease they say caused by a virus, was caused by a virus.
Right.
Okay.
It took two monkeys, right? The two monkeys.
Yeah. 1908. They take a child who's paralyzed. They don't have any idea why. He dies. They take some spinal cord that's diseased. They grind it up, inject it into the brains of two monkeys. One monkey died, one got paralyzed. And they said that proves polio is a contagious disease caused by a virus. I don't know about you, Ben. When I read that, I thought, this is bullshit. Anyways, they do that for 50 years. 100,000 or so monkeys injected into the brain. Then in 1953, somebody decides to inject just normal spine, right? Just ground up normal spine into a monkey's brain, which they never did before. And you know what happened? Monkey got paralyzed, monkey died. And he said, that proves that wasn't true. And then that would have been the end of the whole thing, except 1954, a guy named John Enders got the Nobel Prize for a new way to isolate and discover viruses. And here's what he did. He took somebody with measles, allegedly a specific disease caused by a virus, took some of their mucus, filtered it a little bit, so he got the liquid part, right, not the cells. Then he takes that liquid, puts it on a growing culture of monkey kidney cells, and then he puts in kidney poison antibiotics, and then he puts in fetal bovine serum and horse serum and some other serum, and then he adds some chemicals, and then he takes away the nutrients of the cells, and then 3 days later, the cells die. And he says, that proved a virus in the mucus of the child killed the cells. And I read that, and then here's the paper, got a Nobel Prize. He says, and I'll quote just so everybody knows it's accurate, a second agent was obtained from an uninoculated culture of monkey kidney cells. The cytopathic changes it induced in the unstained preparation could not be distinguished from the viruses isolated from measles. So in other words, he did the same thing without anything from anybody with measles. He got the exact same thing, the exact same electron microscope pictures, and that proves it had nothing to do with any virus, which he never found. And that to this day, Ben, and you got to you really hear this, is the way virologists prove the existence of a virus and, quote, isolate the virus to this day. And that's it. And he proved that it was basically bullshit. 10 other people at the time proved it's nonsense. We did the experiment again where we put all the stuff in without anything from anybody with COVID, and the cells broke down, proving it has nothing to do with any virus. There is no virus in there. They've never done an experiment with a virus because they've never, and admittedly, found a virus in any biological fluid of any sick person or animal, ever. They admit it. Therefore, you cannot do an experiment with a hammer,
right,
if you've never found a hammer.
Exactly right. Tom, I've heard you lecture on just even influenza. They took sick people with so-called influenza, they swabbed their nostrils, and then they tried to pass on the virus to healthy people and they never got sick. Can you walk us through that? I heard you lecture on
So the first step in the so-called germ theory, which I would actually say is a misnomer,
right.
It's the disproven germ hypothesis. So here's the question. Here's the challenge for all your listeners. Do sick people who are supposedly have, quote, infectious disease make well people or animals sick? Because, by the way, when you look at it, so if you say, well, I was around somebody and I got sick, or Aunt Hilda was around Uncle Fred and then she got sick, you're saying that the observation that 2 or more sick people or animals who have the same symptoms, same time, same place, proves it's a contagion. That's what you're saying, right? Now, what about if you put 100 rats in a basement and then you put rat poison down? Next day, 100 rats, they're all dead, same symptoms, same time, same place. By that reasoning, that means rat poison is a contagion. And I don't think that's true.
Right. I'd agree.
So here's the thing. So we have asked for a study that shows, using a controlled experiment, that sick people make well people sick or sick animals. Now, the study you're referring to, the most contagious flu epidemic ever, 1918, guy named Rossino bribes 100 prisoners, we'll let you out of prison, and we're going to have sick people with the flu cough in your mouth, sneeze in your face, talk to you this far apart, stick the snot from the sick people up your nose. We're going to inject you with blood, and then we're going to see if you get sick. They did that to over 100 prisoners. The conclusion was not one person got sick. Now, here's how delusional medical doctors are. You would think that the conclusion would be, it's not contagious, right?
Right.
There's no contagious. They said, well, we didn't try hard enough to prove transmission. And I thought, well, what do they want to do? Like do a lung transplant?
Right.
It's like you do a lung transplant, you put this guy's lung into somebody and then see if they get a cough. I mean, that's literally what they do now. They take ferrets with COVID and they don't look for a virus. They take some snot from somebody with COVID. They squirt it down this ferret's anesthetized bronchial tube. The next day, the ferret gets a cough and has the same quote RNA as what they put in, right? Because they put it in, right? That's why they have the same. And they say that proves we transmitted the illness. Now, I have a challenge for your listeners. I have 200 studies that show no contagion. Somebody send me one study in the history of the medical literature that shows that sick people make well people sick, because I can tell you, Ben, it does not exist.
Tom, I have to agree with you. During COVID, I was deemed essential. It's funny that we had people that were deemed non-essential and essential workers during COVID. It was just comical to me, but I digress. But during that time, I would see roughly 200 something people. I put my hands on 200 something, 200 to 300 people a week. I never wore a mask. I didn't social distance. I had to put my hands on people and patients, and I never got sick. And and I always ask the question, how many people do I have to see? How many violations do I have to break during this? Violations for the World Health Organization and the CDC and all this garbage. But how many violations do I have to break for this whole contagion claim to be mathematically impossible? And so this is where I really got turned on to you. Is like, man, Tom is hitting the nail on the head. He's speaking the truth here, and more people need to listen to him, because I feel like what you're talking about is really revolutionary. It's not really revolutionary. It's just going back to the truth. This is the truth. We've been fed a giant lie in virology.
It's common sense.
It's common sense, but unfortunately, common sense is not so common. And so, but people need to hear this, because so many people just get it backwards. They blame the flies for the trash. They blame the rats on the dump. And it's like, that's just not how it works. That's not why we are sick. So in your opinion, Tom, why do we get sick? And really, why does a healthy person get sick? Can you explain that?
Well, healthy people don't get sick.
Bingo. Right.
So the first thing I want to say is, whatever I say and whether I'm correct or not has no relevance for whether there are viruses or whether bacteria cause disease or whether parasites, unicellular parasites, exist and cause disease, or whether complex organisms like worms cause disease. Whatever I say about why people get sick has no relevance for that. Just like if somebody says, Ben, we're from the police, and we saw somebody in Florida was shot at a 7-Eleven, and he was a man between the ages of 18 and 60, so you're under arrest. And you say, I wasn't in Florida on that day. I know that the day I was at a party, I have 200 witnesses. No, you're under arrest. And Ben, until you tell me who shot that guy, you're guilty. That's ridiculous, right?
Right.
So whatever I say has no relevance for whether there's viruses or not. That has to be very clear. I've already proved that. So many people have shown there is no evidence for the existence of any virus, and there's no evidence that bacteria cause disease, because it's very easy to show that. You just take a bacteria, like you take a hammer, and introduce that to a healthy person, and there is not one study in the medical literature showing that makes them sick.
And that's really the key there. I mean, this is why, how do you say it? I never got sick during COVID. And
lots of other examples.
Exactly.
Okay, right. So now I'm going to speculate based on my 45 years in medicine and just living why I think people get sick. Okay, I'm speculating. I came out eventually with 4 reasons. The first is they get an injury, like they fall off a horse and they break their leg, and that's called a disease. It's an abnormality of the body called a fractured femur, and that's one reason, right? You could fall off a lot of things. So that is not usually what happens to people, but it could, right? Next is they're starving. Now, they're starving for food, clean, good water, shelter, freedom, economic security, relationships, community, love, and many other things. Anytime you're not getting what a normal person, animal, plant needs, I call that starving. A lot of it is you eat food that's not real food. People say to me, so you mean, Tom, I should read labels? And I always say, if it has a label, don't eat it.
Right.
Because if carrots don't have labels, a piece of meat doesn't have a label, might say prime rib, but you know what that is. And so if it has a label, don't eat it, and find out who grew it or grow it yourself, and that's how to eat.
Amen.
So that's number 2. Number 3, which is the second biggest category, is poisoned. Now, there are many ways people get poisoned. In my medical practice, I ended up coming to the conclusion that 60 to 80% of the people were poisoned by doctors. That was the predominant, overwhelming reason why people got sick. Most of them were vaccines. There's not one vaccine that has ever been needed or has any merit, because if there's no germs causing disease, why in the hell would you inject yourself with unknown and known poisons?
Right.
The second biggest category is pharmaceutical drugs, statins, antibiotics, steroids, and you name it, Enbrel, there's a lot of them. Surgery was a big one, that people don't need, and many other things. But there's also glyphosate and EMFs and, lots of, poisons out there. Spraying DDT, lead, arsenic, arsenic is a big one. That's like Pasteur. He tried to prove that anthrax caused disease. So he took plain anthrax. None of his animals got sick. So he used what he called enhanced anthrax, which was anthrax mixed with arsenic. And then he was able to show disease. And you read that and you think, what is wrong with these people?
Right.
This is crazy, because you could easily do an experiment and show that if you feed arsenic to rats, they also get sick. You don't need any anthrax in there.
Right.
So that's the third big category. That's a huge category. And most of it, not all of it, is medical interventions. There's also chemtrails and there's spraying stuff and you name it, right? And the fourth one, which I didn't used to talk about, but now I have come to see as the key to it all, and the predominant reason why people get sick, is they're delusional. Let me give you an example. I knew an anthroposophical doctor, supposedly holistic, who believed in viruses. So he spent his career giving HIV drugs to AIDS patients for an imaginary HIV virus, which has absolutely been disproven to exist. Absolutely. I don't need to get into that, but I've done whole webinars on that. So, of course, if you believe in viruses, once COVID comes along, you do the natural thing, which is to shoot yourself up with poisons to protect yourself against another deadly virus. And then after the third shot, 3 days, 2 days later, dead in his bed because of a stroke or a blood clot or something. And you could say that's because of the poison in the vaccine, right? But I would say it's because he believed in viruses. And if you believe in viruses, he did the normal thing, which is to inject yourself with antiviral stuff. And that killed him. And what happens if you're delusional, and this is, if I was to say what the real cause of disease is, it's victim consciousness. In other words, you believe you're a victim of the government, germs, your genetics, bad luck. You have no agency. You have no sovereignty. It's got nothing to do with your choices, nothing to do with your bad relation with your spouse, that you're being fleeced by the government, by the food you eat, or the fact that you've never moved off your couch, the fact that you can't lift up your cat, for God's sake, because you're so weak. It has nothing to do with that, Ben. It's just you got hit by a virus. That's victim consciousness, and that is the root of all disease.
And I see it everywhere. How many people? Everywhere. How many people have that mentality? They become their diagnosis. That's my biggest pet peeve in healthcare. So many people have this diagnosis. They believe this. And really, you zoom out from a 30,000 sky foot view, and it's a spiritual and psychological warfare. This is more than what meets the eye. This is all spiritual and psychological warfare being pushed on it. And that's what we're talking about here. I mean, just think about, during the COVID era. I mean, even, I think words have meaning. Words have, power behind them. And just the whole word corona means crown. And you have, the Jesus statue, I think it's in El Salvador or something like that, or South America. They lit up the statue of Jesus and they put vaccine saves. I mean, how blasphemous can you be? And for me, I'm a Christian. It's like, I see these things happening. And, and at the vaccine summit of 2019, they took out "In God We Trust" and they put "In vaccines we trust." And this whole thing is really a religion, because as you know more than anybody, you start talking about these things, you're going to get backlash because you're uprooting a belief system. You're uprooting a belief system that has been the roots go deep. The indoctrination roots go so deep with people that you can't even have a dialogue with so many people without them glossing over and just getting almost reacting defensively when you talk about this. Because again, the victim mentality, they want to be the victim. They like being the victim in a weird way. And you're trying to bring truth and light to their lives here, but they almost don't want to believe it. And it's like we're in an uphill battle.
Well, you might like this too. Here's another root cause of disease. So I now tell people, everybody believes in Adam, but there's two kinds of atoms. There's ADAM Adam, which we're told the Creator created Adam out of consciousness or out of God's whatever amazing abilities, was able to create the human being and all that's around us. In other words, we're a creation of this amazing being and power or whatever it is, right? That's one way of looking at it. The other way is we're made of atoms, ATOMs, which are random little balls that have a thing spinning around them, and they're essentially made of nothing, right? Because there's a space between the alleged nucleus and the electron is like from here to St. Louis. And everything happened because one little atom happened in a random, nonsensical way, bumped into another one, and that got a molecule. And then those molecules randomly collided with another one, and then you got a frog. Mm-hmm. And those molecules bumped into another one, and then you got a gorilla. And those gorilla molecules bumped into each other. It took a long time. And then you got Uncle Harry. Now, interestingly, you would have had to get Uncle Harry and Aunt Hilda at the same time. Otherwise, just having Uncle Harry doesn't do you any good, right? Because then that's the end of it. Right. That whole story, that ATOM story, is pure nonsense.
Right.
And by the way, talk about nonsense. If there's no atoms, because they're just mocking you, then there's no atom bombs. That is a psyop. That is a play to scare the shit out of the whole world and to give more power to the government and make people scared and give us your money, and we're going to go to war. And you're going to, by the way, in order to protect yourself, you probably aren't old enough to remember this, we were told to hide under our desks in case the Russians blew an atomic bomb over Detroit. Now, I don't know about you, but if there were an atom bomb, I don't think hiding under my desk would have done me any good. That's pure terrorism.
It is. It's psychological warfare.
It's psychological warfare.
It's exactly right, Tom. Oh man, I just love what we're talking about here, because, and I'm so glad you said it, because I didn't know where we were going with the atoms, the ATOMS, but I'm glad you said it's all BS, because I agree. It is 100% true. What you're talking about, it's true. And the magnitude of what we're talking about literally should change the course of how we view the world. And I'm telling you, it should change our healthcare system. I mean,
we don't need a healthcare system.
Right. And I believe that. I believe God, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And I believe that, our bodies are designed to heal and self-regulate. As long as we just get out of its way, like you said, I think it's such an important topic. And, and to me, we are told that, germs cause disease? Well, we have 10 times more bacteria on and in the body than we do cells. And if the germ theory were fully true, we'd all be dead. Nobody would be alive to talk about it. And so, it's just an interesting concept. And, so many people during COVID, they're paranoid. You saw hand sanitizer everywhere. Like that hand sanitizer saving your life. That's no different than getting underneath your desk. Use the hand sanitizer. It's going to protect you. And it doesn't make any sense. There's no logic in that. And so I do want to talk about something. I heard you lecture again on the PCR test, the polymerase chain reaction, and how there was a certain spin cycle rate, during the time of COVID. And then when the vaccine came out, they lowered the threshold spin cycle rate, which would actually coincidentally lower the cycle rate or the positives. Can we talk a little bit about the PCR test and what it's used for and how it should be exposed for what it is? That it should never be used in the healthcare setting.
So let me just start by saying, let's think about this for a minute. Is it true that that in order to say a part of something came from something, you have to have the something first?
That's 100% true.
Right. Let me give you an example. If I say I got a piece of a toenail and it came from an invisible flying unicorn, somebody would have to have me show them the invisible flying unicorn and that they have that toenail and nobody else has that toenail, right?
Right.
You agree with that?
I agree with that.
Okay. In that case, since nobody has isolated a virus, the definition of isolation is you put snot on a cell culture, and if the cells die, that's called isolation. That's ridiculous, especially because we proved you don't even need the snot to make the cells die. Therefore, nobody has seen a virus. Therefore, nobody knows whether it has DNA, RNA, dog manure or anything in it, right? Because if you don't have the thing we just agreed, you can't measure a part of the thing. How do you know that this segment of DNA, if you've never, as they say, separated the virus from the person? That's what they say. You can't do that. They say you cannot separate the virus from the human being and the bacteria. And by the way, then you say, well, how does it get from one person to the next? They say it gets out of the cell and goes to the next person. And you say, wait a minute, you just told me that it doesn't get out of the cell. It has to be in the cell. No, it goes to the next person. So why don't you catch it then? Well, never mind. Anyways, there's no evidence of this thing existing. Therefore, how can you say that this piece of the thing came from the thing? The answer is you can't. And so all those PCR segments must have come from either the person or the bacteria or the fungus, or you just swallowed a mosquito or a fly, or you drank horse manure or something that has DNA in it, allegedly. I don't even know if there is DNA anymore. But anyways, that's a whole different story. We're not made of chemicals. Living things are spiritual electromagnetic energy. The word became flesh. I don't know how that happened. Maybe you do, but I don't know how that works. But I know it's not because of chemicals, bumping atoms. So getting back to the PCR, there is no evidence that viruses exist. That's the something. Therefore, there's no evidence that they have DNA, RNA, dog poop, or anything in them. So there is no use for a PCR test. There are no positives. There's no negatives. There's no false positives. The cycle rate means nothing, right, except when they do more cycles, they get more so-called light-ups of whatever they're looking at.
Right. And even Kerry Mullis, the inventor of the PCR, as you know, he said it was never meant to be diagnostic. It doesn't tell whether you're sick or not.
It's not a test of anything. You can't say this toenail tells me there was a unicorn unless you've shown me the unicorn, shown me that it has the toenail, and no other animals have that toenail, right? That's just logic. And that's what I mean. These doctors and scientists are scientifically illiterate. And by the way, the freedom community doctors are just as bad, if not worse. That's the big problem right now, because they're keeping the people on the plantation.
Right. I would agree. I mean, I see it, and this is the thing. We're not going to have change. Change is not going to happen unless we really expose this and talk about this and bring this conversation to the forefront. And I agree with you, Tom. I think that this is the magnitude of what we're talking about. It has the potential to change the whole paradigm and to uproot a lot of this tyranny that we are up against. I mean, and I feel like we have a real medical dictatorship at our doorstep. And if we do not bring these conversations, these hard conversations to the forefront to really change the paradigm, we're going to let them in our door. And I feel like that's happening. And I feel like there is an agenda behind this. Again, it's all spiritual, it's all psychological, like we talked about. Just out of curiosity, Tom, are you a Christian?
So I don't like to answer personal questions publicly.
Okay.
Because I don't think it has anything to do with what I'm saying.
No. Okay. Fair enough. I just understand.
Whether there's viruses or not, or whether there's DNA or not, I could be Jack the Ripper, the best Christian, an atheist, or Buddha himself. It doesn't make any difference. What I want from people is a definition of a virus,
yes,
a definition of isolation, a paper showing that they've proven a virus exists. I don't care what you say about me. I don't care what you think about anything. I don't care whether you beat your wife or not. That's what I want to know. Now, I don't like beating people's wives, right?
I was going to say, yeah.
But I'm in my professional capacity here.
Yes, I agree.
And I'm sticking to that
right.
Because that's what I want to know.
Yes.
I don't care what you think of me. I don't care whether you think I'm a jerk or an asshole or whatever. Right. I want to see a paper showing the proper evidence that a virus exists.
Right. To me, I just feel like I don't know, the older I get, the more I realize we are not just humans having a spiritual experience, but yet we are spiritual vessels having a human experience. And I feel like just even in our healthcare systems, in our education, we compartmentalize everything. And there's so much division and compartmentalization. And I think that there lies the problem. Even in the body, we compartmentalize the body for how do you say it, to ease of study. But then also we compartmentalize it in our healthcare systems. And I think that's a real problem. But again, I just feel like we are in such spiritual warfare now more than ever before. And I see it. And I think that, we need to have boldness in this area. But, and so I was just curious to ask that question, but, and I respect your views tremendously, and I want to be respectful to you. But, going back to the clinical setting and not having this PCR test, what other diseases? I know if the PCR test is eradicated, that eradicates the need for all vaccines. And going back to the virology topic, and I used to say, people are just waking up to the vaccine issue now. I don't think it's time to bring in the virology talk and say, hey, viruses don't exist, because that's going to make their heads explode. I'm like, well,
I disagree with that entirely.
I am at the point now where I'm in a transition where I am agreeing with you that we need to bring this topic to the forefront. Because, it's just like you write in the vaccines on immunity. You go back and you say there's some pseudoscience in that. Well, the soil for truth is rich right now. I feel like we need to bring this conversation to the forefront. And that's why I'm sitting down with you. But 4 years ago, people were waking up to the vaccine issue because the government overplayed their hand. They're pushing this vaccine topic so hard that I'm like, listen, we just need to bring the truth about vaccines and expose it for what it is. And I would almost discourage people bringing truth about the virology topic. But now I'm like, people, now we need to talk about it. It is now the time. It is such an important issue that we need to be bringing awareness to this, because it's not going to change. It's not going to change. And we have people in the freedom movement that are pushing this lie, this deception even further down the road, and we need to expose it. So I just want to know your thoughts. Do you think people are going to change? Do you see this? Where do you see us in 5 years if we don't change? And what do you think's down the road for us?
I mean, I don't know. My role in life right now, besides gardening and playing with my cats and taking care of my goats and processing food, which I did today, I froze 10 bags of green beans and a whole thing of red currants, which I make drinks out of. I just tell the truth as I see it. Now, what people do with that, or where they're going to go with it, or what's going to happen in 5 years, I mean, I don't know. And honestly, I don't know. I do think that we're in a dangerous time because the powers that be are ramping up their game big time. And, this is the powers that be are trying to digitalize and computerize and AI everything that they can. And the leaders of the freedom movement, the MAGA and MAHA, are in on it big time. And so they've co-opted the resistance, which is what like Lenin or Stalin or said, if you want to deal with the resistance, the best way is to lead it. So they're very smart, and they get people to police each other. Like, you can't say that kind of thing. But there's a lot of people who aren't buying it. And where this is going to go, I don't know. What my role in it is I just keep telling it like I see it and following one lead after another. Is there nuclear weapons? Well, I want to know who proved there was a nucleus. I happen to know that because I went and looked at the original papers, and I can tell you, the guy named Rutherford took a fine sheet of gold and he shoots a light through it. 99.9% of it didn't deflect. And so he said that means all of the mass of everything is concentrated into, 0.001%. Therefore, let's call that the nucleus. Well, it turns out he had impurities in the glass film, in the gold film. And that's why it scattered the light in only certain places, which disproves that there is a nucleus. And that was the original proof, and I've looked, is there DNA? And so I looked at the original paper to show how they proved there's DNA, and it's a joke. They took some white blood cells, they centrifuged it, mixed it with some chemicals, then they put it in an X-ray for 63 hours, and they got a picture of an X on their X-ray film. Now, interestingly, a group of undergraduates at, I think, Sussex University did the entire procedure, mixed some things with acid, etc., except they started with a ballpoint pen spring, not anything from a living being, and they got the exact same picture. So I tell people we're just as likely to have our hereditary code be DNA or the springs from ballpoint pens. The trouble is, if it was springs from ballpoint pens, which were were invented about 100 years ago, it's hard to know what the code was before 100 years.
Right.
And by the way, they say the DNA codes for proteins, and then they say there's 200,000 proteins, 20,000 genes, and all I can figure is geneticists don't know arithmetic.
Right.
Because there's 180,000 missing codes for proteins. This is a joke.
Right.
And they're mocking you. That's the atom thing. It's just mocking you.
Right.
Here's another one that you might like. Where are the proteins, the supposedly the living things that make us up, made in our tissues? Do you know?
Genome?
The ribosomes.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
That's where the mRNA, all these mRNA shots, they go to the ribosomes and they get translated into proteins, right? Well, it turns out there is no such thing as a ribosome. They're an electron microscope artifact. A guy named Harold Hillman proved that. But you know what ribosome means?
No.
So there's rib, right?
Okay.
O, the soma. What is soma?
Many.
Body.
Body.
Right?
Okay.
You ever heard the expression that the human being was created from the rib of the body?
Yes.
They're mocking you.
Right. It's so interesting. Going back to words have meaning. That's crazy.
That's crazy. They're mocking you.
Yeah.
That's why they call them atoms. That's why they call it ribosomes. That's why it's one thing after another. It's just mockery.
It is mockery. And you're blowing my mind right now. And I think it's so interesting, and this is,
Ben, every single picture of a ribosome is a perfect circle. Every single one. Now, think about how you got that picture. You took some tissue, ground it in a blender, centrifuged it, mixed it with some chemicals, put it in an electron beam to dehydrate the water, mixed it with heavy metals, and then you get this picture. And they're all perfect circles, which means they were spheres in real life, like, right? Because it's a. Now, what are the chances you took an orange, right? That's a sphere, and you cut it up in a blender and you dehydrate it and you mix it with some acids and you shoot an electron beam and you put heavy metals on it and then you get a picture of it and every piece will be a perfect circle?
It's rare.
It's zero.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
It cannot happen. And so that doesn't exist. It's and a guy, Harold Hillman, he proved these are gas bubbles that form when the tissue is dying and they get stained and they are called ribosomes to mock you. Wow. This is what we call science today.
Right. And, you know, what was the gentleman's name that proved that, Tom?
Harold Hillman. If anybody wants to learn biology, read Harold Hillman.
I am going to.
Because he disproved just about everything. All we have is we don't have cell membranes. We don't have receptors on cell membranes. There's no ACE2 receptors. There's no opiate receptors. There's no serotonin receptors. There's no synapses in nerves. The way to get a synapse in a nerve is you take a nerve, which is a continuous tube of water, and you dehydrate it. It's like taking a piece of thread, right? And you dehydrate it and it breaks and rolls up at the place it broke. And that's called the synapse. And if you say, well, show me that without dehydrating it, right? Because it should be there. No, you can't find it. Why not? Well, because you have to dehydrate in order to see the synapse. Well, that's because dehydrating it made the synapse appear. So all this Prozac and serotonin receptors and the way the nerves work, it's total nonsense.
Well, Tom, I want to shift gears with you because I wanted to talk to you about and get on the topic of EMFs and just your thoughts on that as well, because obviously we have a rollout during COVID, even with the 5Gs. I mean, it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And we had a massive military operation here to roll out 5G towers. How are these EMFs affecting us, in your opinion? How is like all this exposure to these frequencies affecting us and our level of health?
So the way it works, as best I understand it, is the world runs on frequencies. We are bathed in what's called the ether, which is an electromagnetic bath. Now, the sun is a electromagnetic frequency emitter, as is the moon, as is the earth. But they're all very complex frequencies, right? They're not just one frequency. They're complex, and none of the frequencies is like that intense, right? Because it's a spectrum. And same with humans emit frequencies, and frogs and dogs and cats and plants. Everything emits frequencies and receives frequencies. That's how human beings work. We are bioelectric, electromagnetic frequency devices. Now, into that comes people who want to make things work by having single or very few frequencies of high intensity. Otherwise, it doesn't work, right? You can't run your television off the sun. Well, you sort of can, but you know you have to have, if you want a signal, it has to be a certain frequency, high intensity. And so that's radio signals and radar signals and 5G, 4G, all the rest of it. The problem is living beings were never meant to be exposed to those kind of high intensity, single frequency emissions. And so they cause damage. And so, and they cause a lot of damage. And the higher the frequency, the higher the intensity and the more concentrated the frequency, you can kill people and wound them and maim them and make them do all kinds of crazy stuff and make them nuts and all the rest of it. And so that's the and the thing is, things won't work without you doing it like that, right? You can't get your cell phone to work. So they have a rationale. Well, it doesn't work otherwise. But that's their preferred way It's like the whole wearable thing. They're going to hook everybody up and everybody's brain to these frequencies. And so we will be manipulatable and controllable. And they will be able to produce whatever disease they want. That's the game. And the Maha people are in on it.
And it breaks my heart because I have, I had some hope for this movement. I understand that the soil for truth is rich, and it does break my heart to even say that and to hear that. And
hope is for suckers, Ben. That's why one of the biggest play people for suckers was the hope and change guy. It's interesting. You know where the origin of hope is?
Well,
it's interesting. What?
I say Christ.
Well, maybe, but here's another story. According in Pandora's box, so goes the story, were all the evils of the world. And the king, her father, said, don't open the box, because then all the evils, greed and lust and everything will be unleashed. Anyways, he went away on a vacation or something, and she decided to open the box. And all of these evils came out into the world, and that's why we have them. There was one that didn't come out, and that's called hope. Now, there's two interpretations of that story. One is, God put hope in there to give mankind hope. And the other is, hope is a horrible evil. Now think about it. When I was in San Francisco and I was thinking of, we got to get out of here, they were going to put a 5G tower on our street. So what did I do? I hoped they didn't do that. And they did it. Hope paralyzes you. I could have had a hammer or an axe or something. And I could have done something, I didn't want to do that, so I moved. But whenever you hope, you paralyze yourself. I'm hoping for the best. That's why they sold hope and change, right? And we all know how that worked out.
I totally see that perspective. And Tom, I love and appreciate you and respect you. But I would say that there's the world secular view of hope. And that is, I think, what you're describing. And and I can totally see where that is designed to paralyze us. And it can be, and it would really give us, I would say, a spirit of complacency. And it doesn't, and that's really what it boils down to. And this is where, and I think that's what maybe the enemy wants. But there is a hope that is to be found, and I say Christ. And this is where my faith is. And that hope is, it's not the secular view of hope. It's almost a joy that I find in the midst of the chaos, and the joy is a strength. And that's what keeps me going, because there's so much evil in the world. There's so much.
Then I would use the word joy or possibility.
Yes. And the joy is in my spirit. It's different than just emotion.
That's fine.
Yes.
I totally get that. I think we need to differentiate the words.
Yes.
Because they have co-opted that word to paralyze people.
Right. I could see that 100%. And that's going back to spiritual. It's all deception.
It's all deception.
It's all deception. 100% it is. And, so, Tom, I feel like we could talk for hours, and I really would like to have another conversation with you. And I'd love to, I know we interviewed you for our documentary, and I have that footage. I'd love to even come together, and I think we need to do another documentary on this very topic of virology and just really bring this, how do you say it, to the masses. I think this conversation needs to be heard. And Tom, on that note, I'd love to just really, how do you say, end this with you. I'm not saying to bring in a message of hope, but just maybe a positive message for people on, what's one thing people can walk away from this conversation on a positive note.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. Because I think I don't think one should have a positive perspective. It should be realistic and honest and truthful. Now, I happen to think that there are beings and forces that are on our side, and that if we just learn to think and clear away the stuff that keeps us from thinking, that we can do great stuff here. I do think that. But to me, there's no victims. It's up to us. It's totally up to people have a choice. And that's the way it is. And that's the way it should be. And they can choose, and they can choose whatever way they want. And I'm trying to choose what is real and what is the most, loving, nonviolent, helpful way to be in the world. That's what I'm looking for.
Awesome. Well, Tom, where can people find you? What would you like? Where can we guide the listeners to find you?
So the general website is drtomcowan.com. We also started a new biology clinic where we treat people according to reality, not according to disproven bogus hypotheses. And so that's the newbiologyclinic.com. And we have a bunch of ex-trained they're all trained medical doctors who said there's got to be a better way.
Fantastic. Tom, I love and appreciate you. Love all the wisdom that you bring here. Love your boldness, just the honesty here, and just your willingness to stand in the gap for what's true. And that's why you're on here. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because I just have a ton of respect for you. I really would like to have another conversation with you and just have a dialogue on autoimmunity, from these vaccines.
There's no such thing as autoimmunity.
Well, how do we say it? Let's say the more poisoning adverse events from vaccines.
Here's why I say that. The definition, and definitions mean something, right? Is the disease is caused by antibodies. Your antibodies attack yourself. That's the definition of an autoimmune. There is not one published study in the scientific literature showing that antibodies make a well animal or person sick. And I don't want anybody's opinion. I want to see a study because I know it doesn't exist.
So I agree with that statement. But in all disease, I'm a believer that all disease starts with toxicity and deficiency. I believe that. I believe in epigenetics and the terrain model 100%.
There's no epigenetics because that means there's genetics.
So you don't believe in genetics?
It's not a matter of believing in genetics. I looked for the evidence that there is something called DNA and that it codes for protein and that it's in a double helix and it's not there, Ben. And epigenetics is the domain of people who haven't looked into this foundational claim that there is something called genetics. It's a victim consciousness. So it's not me. I have bad genes, and so that's why I'm sick.
I think we need to have a part 2, Tom. I love this conversation. I mean, it's good to have. I'm open to learning. My background is, I learned from a doc that was pushing epigenetics, and he kind of correlated the two of the terrain model and talked about allostatic load and all these different things. But I think we have to have a part 2 of this conversation. I just really value what you have to say. And I'm just thankful that we were sitting down, and I'm thankful for your time today, Tom. So newbiology.com.
Newbiologyclinic.com and drtomcowan.com.
Okay. Tom, thank you so much.
All right, Ben.
Really appreciate you. And thank you, listeners. And please love and share this podcast. Thanks so much.
To August of last year, nobody really knew who I was.
There's about 12 people who are producing 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation.
We need to come together as Americans and realize that we have a war at hand here. Right?
Like, dude, how scared of this shit do you have to be, right, to be wearing gloves, a face shield, and a mask at this point?
Help us to urge folks and say to them, look, it's time to roll up your sleeve and get the shot.
Chiropractor in Omaha, Nebraska, responsible for 65% of the anti-vaccine misinformation. Put what I say to the test. Just don't write me off as crazy misinformation.
Doctor, please bring yourself in order.
600,000 people will die of cancer. 300,000 people will die of obesity this year. When is enough enough?